Everybody has some statement about what the fourth dimension is. People say it's time or a tesseract. You'll see these aren't just wrong, they miss the idea completely because a dimension isn't time or an object, it's a category.
Image of a tesseract, as it's envisioned in pop science, doesn't really tell us anything about what the fourth dimension is. That's because treating the tesseract as the fourth dimension is a categorical error. It's not just wrong, it's nonsensical. This confuses a thing with the system that allows things to exist. That's because the tesseract is just one of many shapes that exist within that system. Also, in response to the claim that time is the fourth dimension, I'm actually really happy about this one because, unlike the tesseract, it actually is a dimension. The issue is it can also be the first, second, third, or the 10th dimension if you want it to be. People tend to privilege time over other candidates because it feels like it should be the fourth dimension. The reason it makes sense to them is because it's really the only other descriptive trait of the world that's immediately apparent, aside from the fact that we live in 3D. Time gives a way to chronologically order the events that occur in our world. So yes, it is true that unlike the tesseract, time does meet the definition of a dimension. But to say time is the fourth dimension is still categorically false. This reveals we still misunderstand the idea of dimensionness. So, why do both these notions for the fourth dimension exist? Well, to answer this, I think it's important to recognize that both the object that is a tesseract and the temporal notion of time are totally different things. In fact, it's hard to think of two things more different. One is a static shape, and one is some immaterial way of describing the speed at which events happen. Yet, why do you hear so often that these are both the fourth dimension? This is because they are both pointing at something very important about dimensionality. The thing we are able to take away from the tesseract and time comes from exactly how different they are. The tesseract is an object within the fourth spatial dimension, coming right after the third spatial dimension, our 3D, and time, which seemingly also comes right after our 3D. How can this be? Well, it's because sometimes we choose to measure our world chronologically, arbitrarily making time our fourth dimension. Other times we choose to think about what another mathematical layer on top of 3D would look like, and that's the tesseract, another layer on top of our three-dimensional cube. Essentially, the idea here is that although these are being used as a fourth dimension, they are not both part of some bigger fourth dimension. Think of them more like two different types of round you can put in the chamber of a 6-shooter. They both can go in, but they are not both part of some larger bullet. You see, dimensions work as if you have a ton of small boxes and several large boxes. You can choose only one small box to put into each big box. Our boxes aren't objects, of course. They're a way of keeping track of independent categories of measurement. So, let's say you decide to use 4 big boxes. What that means is you have to pick 4 unique small boxes and put one of them into each big box. Now, I want you to picture 3 of our big boxes in a line. These are going to be our set of space boxes, not space like outer space, but space like spatial, something we can do stuff in. These boxes will be ordered by what ends up going inside of them. As of now, they are just empty vessels. The first little box we choose to put in big box number 1 is the property of length. Then, for big box number 2, we choose the property of width. And finally, for big box number 3, we choose the property of depth. This results in us getting a full 3D view here, since each property we chose was entirely unique from the other 2. Okay, now that we're starting to develop a good concept of dimensions, we can finally talk about the fourth spatial dimension. So, we just filled 3 big boxes with length, width, and depth. What happens when we fill one more big box? Well, the next totally unique spatial dimension is called, well, it doesn't really have a name actually. The names we give the first three come from our human experience, but in math they're really just coordinates. And since we don't experience the fourth spatial dimension, we can only really say it looks like one more coordinate added on after the first three. That does not mean it's some mystical thing, because we can still make specific claims about it. Most importantly, we can say this fourth dimension does the same kind of job as the first three. It describes how shapes can vary, but it varies independently of all of them. So we're going to coin the name independence. So the tesseract does exist in 4 dimensions. It's not something you can visualize, however, and it definitely doesn't look like what people usually show you. Now, let's help you digest what just happened here by giving you a parallel, the set of 4 YouTube dimensions. A YouTube video can be described in many unique ways. Taking our big boxes, we choose from the first one to be filled with video length, the second with the amount of views, the third with the information density of the video. A video that's 7 minutes long, has 11 views, and is very information dense mirrors a box that is 7 inches long, 11 inches wide, and is very tall. And to give you something you can envision and latch onto, as being a type of 4th dimension for this video, we can call it pacing. Even though we have a 4th dimension of pacing, it doesn't feel like some crazy abstract quality just emerged out of thin air. And that's because unlike the spatial 4th dimension, we live in a world with YouTube videos like this that we can actually picture. Of course, our parallel to pacing is our 4th spatial dimension of independence. We can list things about it in the same way. A tesseract is 5 inches long, 5 inches wide, 5 inches tall, and its 4th coordinate, independence, is 6. Same kind of description, just one more direction. So without really noticing, we've already fully covered 2 big groups of dimensions. One is the spatial group, starting from a simple line and building all the way up to the tesseract. The other is the YouTube group. And once you see that a group of dimensions is really just a group of distinct measurable properties, it becomes easy to spot the structure everywhere. We naturally describe things as collections of independent qualities all the time. We just don't usually call them dimensions. Now we've demystified the idea of the 4th dimension and even left room for more dimensions to be added on after that, without them becoming some special, crazy property. We are now able to give a clear definition to the word that won't go misunderstood. A dimension is a unique, quantifiable, independent trait used to describe something. If it seems a little vague, you're correct, but that is by design. Dimensions are used like a tool to describe vastly different things.
And the more complex something is, the more dimensions it has. So keep watching my videos if you don't want to be one-dimensional. Thanks for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing for more weekly content. Goodbye.